I sound my barbaric yawp over the world. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today we're talking about, the title of the video is Axe, Maintaining Lethality in a World of Facile Twinks, right? Subtitle, The Meek Shall Inherit the Earth. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the aspect, especially for men, to understand that your fundamental identity and strength cannot necessarily be pacific. It has to at some point rely on a fundamental capacity to kill, to basically, and this is, I'm not talking about this purely in the physical sense, as none of the videos are pretty much ever about anything purely in the physical sense, but in the metaphysical sense. What does it mean when somebody is killing it, right? I mean, in the literal sense, somebody is killing, an animal or person or something like that, but generally in common parlance, at least in the United States, at least on the West Coast, generally throughout the United States, if you're killing it, you're doing a good job at whatever you're doing, and you are basically slaying the obstacles that are in front of you, or at least were in front of you, and it's basically just a positive moniker for someone who is capable and someone who is doing an excellent job and just absolutely running like the juggernaut right through every single barrier that stands in between them and their goals, right? So this is, but at the same time, as many other things in English and metaphysics, is your ability to kill it in the metaphysical sense is at some point tied to your ability to kill it in the physical sense. And, I'm a person who was a vegan for many, many years. I've never actually gone hunting. I've definitely never killed any people, but at the same time, I made a decision. I came to a spiritual level of understanding many, many years ago that I was prepared to kill in order to protect myself and those that I care about, and that's something that I don't think a lot of people confront in a preventive sense in this society. It's a facile society where everyone's just shallow and easy and just sitting on a couch and playing video games, and when they're confronted by an actual, opponent or problem or conflict, they just melt away and, there should be a new English word for that type of response, but it's just, they just go flaccid. They just completely run away and they break down. And we men in this society no longer have a rite of passage. In all the ancient cultures, there was always a rite of passage, and it signified that you are now a man. You are a man of the tribe. Basically, you are empowered and with the authority to act on behalf of the group, right? Because we know now that you are of our spirit. We are of a common spirit. Kind of like we're talking about, the society can only hold itself together if we focus on the bonds that unite us, as people. And that doesn't mean that all the people in the world are connected. On some level, we're connected, right? We're all technically human species, right? Technically, our DNA can match with any other member, right? If I were to procreate with a Chinese woman or a black woman or anything, it physically can connect, right? So at some point we have some sort of common identity, but at the same time, a lot has happened since the days of Adam and Eve, if you will, to go with the allegory. At some point, in the mitochondrial evidence, there is evidence that there was sort of a common mother, which would imply a common human ancestor, but at the same time, there's so much that's obscured about human history. It's really kind of ultimately pointless to make any serious claims about origins and patterns, other than to say that they do exist. But to say where they come from, that's a little bit more difficult. As we've pointed out, our history isn't exactly this rise, this gradual rise from, apes in the Ice Age into the modern, hairless ape of a human, who basically, has created all the technology in the world purely so he can, sit and play video games, or he kills people in Call of Duty and watches porn and eats Cheetos, right? What is it? The Darwin's evolution of man, and then it just evolves back down to a man hunched over at a computer, So we have this tremendous point that we've reached as a civilization, and it manifests in the computer, right? The laptop is almost a symbol of that state, right? That we can literally connect to the entire world and access virtually any piece of information, hypothetically, if you had the right access codes and knew where to look. And it's like we've designed like the most powerful weapon in the world, and we use it to basically pick the dirt out of our toenails, right? It's made for a higher purpose, right? And a laptop really to me is my weapon, right? I am proficient with my firearm, but my firearm is not my primary weapon, right? And nor is the laptop the primary weapon. My mind is my weapon, right? The mind and the spirit are the primary weapons, because even a mind that is, sharp as a tack, when it's faced with, a situation that compromises it spiritually, all of a sudden the strength fades, and they go flaccid and run away like the rest of the beta cucks, and all of that strength, physical strength or big, emotional toughness melts away instantaneously as soon as they're faced with a truly scary spiritual situation. And in the event that they become bound, to some, demonic entity, then all of a sudden their strength can only be used in service to the master, right? It can no longer be used in service to him, the agent, right? And all of a sudden he becomes sort of, just a monster in service to powers far beyond them. And so that's why it's important to recognize the power of the spiritual aspect and the metaphysical aspect, is that when you are free of spiritual bonds to demonic masters, you have the power to do what you will. You have the power to act in liberty and freedom and fulfill that free will, and you are not a monster unless you choose to be, and we can all become monsters as needed. Again, it's like the ability to kill it. He's killing it, man. He's a monster, right? These generally, you can call people, he's a monster, the words can have entirely opposite meanings in this culture and language based on how they're inflected. But, the positive aspect of a monster who is killing it is basically one for whom obstacles present, the lightest and most minor of a nuisance, right? And not a nuisance at all. Look at it as an opportunity, right? All the walls are targets, right? For me to test out my new and improved firepower. And again, I very much enjoy and am enthusiast of firearms of various sorts. And, again, I am a carry permit holder, so at all times, I may not, I may not weigh 180 pounds and, have a black belt, but when it comes down to it, if I need to defend myself, hollow points do the same to every person, no matter how big or small they are, right? So I don't care if it's a 300-pound, it's a 7-foot, monster of a man coming at me and he's addled on PCP. I can put him down. Like, it's not a question, and it's important. That's not something I ever want to do, but it affects my psychology. It affects everyone's psychology who is a carry permit holder. That you, first of all, you don't have to necessarily fear, as long as you just remain aware and know that you have the power to respond in situations that could be threatening. That puts your mind at ease in a big way for me. People who are, facile twinks, right? They to them, the idea of carrying a firearm is like terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. And they would never even consider such a thing because it is so scary and dangerous. And if, they're so concerned that they would accidentally shoot themselves or somebody else would get hurt, right? All this gun control bullshit. And where does it stem? From where does it originate? It is primarily fear, generally fear, lack of self-comfort in one's own identity. You can't, I know how to handle my firearm. I know that it's not, first of all, it's on safety, but it is loaded, right? And it's important to recognize that you must become proficient, you must train, you must have mastery over your mind so you know that you're not going to make those decisions. You know you're in control of your body and your movements and your weapon, right? And so the chance of any of those things happening is zero as long as you are in a state of strength and confidence and alignment with, basically the creator of the universe, knowing that you will only use deadly force when absolutely needed to prevent your own death, to preserve your own life, the lives of your family, and the lives of other innocents who, potentially are under threat from, some other criminal, violent actor, and It's unfortunate that the gun laws have gotten so bad as they are, because, if you're even a good, citizen, permit holder, and you respond to a criminal situation, unless you do it in the perfect way, you can very much get in trouble and be charged with crimes yourself, right? I would like to see a society where we embraced more of the white blood cell model with no racial connotations, just white blood cell in the biological sense of the immunity cell, of cells that self-regulate in the body and go after the pathogens, right? And there is such a thing as, too little and too much of a response of the white blood cells, right? The reason that people, die from COVID, for example, is a cytokine storm. It's the immune system goes into hyperdrive and it starts attacking the body's own tissue. That would be, in the macro sense, the equivalent of over-policing, of militarized policing, of coming down, on a protest or a riot with basically nuclear weapons and strategic bombers. And so, yes, you would put down the protest, you'd also level the downtown city blocks. And so it would be a Pyrrhic victory, and your costs would, outweigh the value of the victory. And so that is basically, again, people don't die because of the virus. They die because their own immune system rips their organs apart, and then their vital organs can't function, right? And so the same thing happens when people are just generally, unregulated of their immune system because of various toxic, influences, right? They tried to say that it was all a virus, HIV, but it's actually just AIDS is a composition of a number of different conditions, and the virus HIV has never actually been identified or, conclusively shown to be, essentially communicable in the sense that they're saying it is. But it's basically the dysregulation of the immune system because of, toxic drug habits, alcohol habits, dietary habits, air, water, sexual habits. It's a bunch of degenerate aspects to one's life that basically leads to these conditions. And sure enough, the people who took the chemical to fix it, AZT, they died, right? And it basically just completely poisoned them. But the people who turned back to, health and detox and rejuvenating the body, they ended up, it just went away. And the fated, AIDS complication, the terminal condition, never actually materialized, and it went away. Because this body is not merely a material, pinball machine where we just have cause and effect and basically, a bunch of random stuff in between. It is light form, right? It is a wave form. It has an energetic structure. And it is basically able to respond to situations that are wholly immaterial with a material response. Again, how, when you become activated, sexually, is that a material thing? Like, did somebody physically press a button on the back of, your brain stem and, activate this sexual response and get you turned on? Like, no, it's entirely an etheric thing. And it's not necessarily just triggered by, a physical stimuli, and so dreams, again, are totally immaterial, but at the same time they can fundamentally affect one's entire worldview, and thus effects in the physical world. This is an etheric world and an electric universe primarily. And so, in that light, it is important to recognize that actual force on the etheric plane is a result of independence on the spiritual plane. And to the extent that we are able to cultivate those self-reliant, personality traits and really actually become the, again, Jordan Peterson has taken a lot of flack from various sectors, but I find his message to be more relevant than ever. I'm glad that he has, made it through his, battle with withdrawal from benzodiazepine. It's his own struggle shows that basically, one can affect the physical world in a big way and still be actually, compromised on some level. So Black Pigeon Speaks just did a video like yesterday or something, basically talking about the new male and the twinkification of society and how, young men's testosterone levels today are the lowest they've ever been. It's basically, they took a sample of BuzzFeed readers and writers, and they found that their testosterone was lower than an 85-year-old man. And, there's, again, we have to essentially question at a certain point, whether these hormones that are going into the water supply and the artificial, ingredients that we are ingesting, right, from bisphenol A in the plastics, which is basically an estrogen mimicker. It fundamentally disrupts the endocrine system. And even beyond bisphenol A, BPA, there's other chemicals that they're even replacing it with, saying, oh, it's BPA free, but they put in something else that has just like the same effect, toxic effect, just on a lesser scale. And, there's the genetically modified soy products, right? Like a little bit of soy, and if it's organic, is really, some tofu is not going to kill you, right? The samurai ate tofu, back in the day, as do the new, Japanese new male who is, so it's not just soy, it's not just what you eat, but it's your psychology. It's how you interact with the world. And, I don't regret any of the time that I spent as a vegan. I think it's a very important phase to go through when one is cleansing the toxic aspects of one's body. And, if you find yourself being excessively carnivorous and very hostile and aggressive as a result, again, we don't want to swing the pendulum back and forth to that degree. We want to keep it within a range that is controllable, because the more that we can control the powers, the more that we can direct it, and the more that we can use it for effective purposes. We don't want to be, necessarily too hot or too cold, but we want to be able to control the frequency at will. And there's a story in the Bible, where there's a city, and there was the city of Jericho, and back then, I guess I don't know the actual story, but there were 7 shofar ram's horns that blew, and the sound that came out from those horns basically leveled the walls of Jericho, and the walls of Jericho came crashing down. And it's an interesting story to relate in the sense that the power of coherent sound, the power of coherent energy can completely dysregulate and destroy matter and break the bonds that holds it together. And, with electric, scalar fields, we can do the same. Even with sound, people are familiar with, high-pitched sounds resonating with the glass and shattering the wine glass or shattering a window. It is technically possible with frequency to destroy the bonds of matter and to use just that force on a molecular, etheric level to physically affect matter. In the biological sense, we know this as chi, we know this as prana, we know this as the life force, animal magnetism, some would say. And it's basically how a kung fu master can throw a huge, boxer across the room, how he can completely manipulate energy because it is in perfect balance and coordination of their own movement and energy. And they demonstrate, what the master martial artist and kung fu and qigong masters will demonstrate is that controlling energy is, controlling matter, and it is primary to understand that strength and lethality comes from peace and serenity at the core of our being, right? We are the eye of the storm. Inside the eye of the storm, it's picnics and parades, right? It's pure peace. But outside that wall, outside that core, is the most insane storm you have ever seen in your life. 100-foot waves, when the storm is big enough, and absolute terror to, the strongest of men, right? When you see a tidal wave coming at you, I don't care who you are, that's the scariest thing in the entire world. And I've had lots of dreams involving tidal waves because that is such a primal, ultimate fear. As the Irish used to say, I fear no man but the sea to rise, and I fear no God but the sea to fall. And basically, communicating that knowledge and memory of ancient disaster. And that, our great strength is our ability to survive. And, part of that meant becoming a lethal species. We did not live in the abundance that we used to. We had to fight for what we had, and we had to kill, and, we had to attack and kill each other. It wasn't all rainbows and parades like it is today, right? It was very much a climatic shift. It was a brutal world. And so we did what we had to survive. And, now we are in a new condition, yes, but at the same time, the climate could shift again, because of solar indices. And and everything would be lost, right? And we would have to start from scratch, and we would have to remember every little piece of how this world is made. So which piece of the world have you basically focused on? Which obstacles will you destroy? To what will you point your weapon, so to speak, in a physical and metaphysical sense? What are you willing to fight and die for? Like Terry Crews basically saying, there are white people that are good, and there are black people, not all white people are bad and not all black people are good. So I resolve to stand with the good people of all colors and races, and basically I'm prepared to die on this hill, come at me, because I'm not going to abandon that position. And Terry Crews is the man, and I love that sentiment. And yes, to those of us who are in the true morality and not the false pseudo-morality, the morality that says that marriage is just a social institution, that, we can have people who are marrying dogs and marrying men and, or just marrying whoever they want, because it doesn't have anything to do with childbearing. It's just love, right? We all just love each other. And it's such a facile, twinkified society that doesn't have any connection with its fathers and their fathers' fathers. It doesn't have any connection with their children that they're raising. The liberal, parents, basically don't instruct their kids in how to actually be a human. They just tell them to go to school. They teach them basically, conventions about the society. But, I just really don't see any liberal parents per se doing it well from my perspective. And again, a lot of them don't have any strong connections between them, and so the marriages fall apart. And generally I would, I don't know the statistics, but I bet that liberal, families break up, at a higher rate than conservative families, just because to them marriage is really just a materialist institution, not a spiritual institution. But going back to the eye of the storm, right? What the eye of the storm is, and what these cells are, these Hadley cells and, columns within the atmosphere, is basically energy coming in to the Earth from space, from the solar wind, and from, just galactic cosmic rays. And so the force and peace of the eye of the storm, it is basically the result of that perfect cosmic alignment in a literal physical sense, an electric sense, is that from the very, basically underneath the water, the surface of the water, up into space, it is one unified rotating electric column, a magnetic column inside the center of a storm. And so that is who we must be. That is the energy that we must resonate with if we are to be, the lethal, the strong, the absolutely unstoppable juggernaut that society does require from us in order to go forward and claim the world that is right at our fingertips, and that is not this commie revolution and basically this gray, miserable society, but it is a glorious society in which people can do what they want. If people want to mix together and be diverse, that's awesome. If people want to separate and they want to basically refine themselves in their own little enclaves, that's fine. But we're going to have a general unified structure, and everyone's going to be held to an account to objective reality and objective morality. And if anybody's got a problem with that, well, then they're not going to have a great time in this civilization. And just like they don't have a good time in the current civilization, right? And it's generally these people who are constantly just bitching and complaining about all these things that society isn't doing right, generally, haven't taken basic steps within their own lives to actually make things better. It's always blaming somebody else. It's always somebody else's fault. Again, the facile twinkification of society is he who cannot confront any obstacle. He cannot confront anything, because all he knows how to do is look at a screen and basically, type words on a keyboard, right? And that's all great. We can, again, use computers to miraculous effect in this world, and we already have. But it's the difference between, going forth with the Hattori Hanzo sword, to clean your fingernails versus going to slay the dragon. And there are many dragons in play and rampaging on this planet right now. And, the way to vanquish them, as always, is not necessarily through physical violence. Again, always be prepared to defend yourself against their demonic emissaries, because they're on the streets too, as we all are aware at this point. again, more first-time gun registrations right now than ever before in American history. And gun control is dead in the water. You know, we are going to get 4 more years of Trump, but the question is, who comes after? And what are we going to do now, between now and then, every single day, to ensure that it doesn't matter what happens on that level or any political level, but we are going to have all bases covered, and we are going to have resilient, redundant systems that can completely withstand being cut out of the system, to the point where they could cut our power, they could cut our communication lines. It doesn't matter, because we won't even be using them. We'll be totally off-grid and self-sufficient. We'll have communication systems that are, again, resilient and redundant and decentralized in their management and organization, and it's all very possible. All it takes is the spiritual strength and the warrior aspect, and how to be, you know, basically what Jordan Peterson had a great definition of what meek really means in the Bible, in the ancient Greek, right? And the meek shall inherit the earth. What does that mean? And he translated meek as he who is armed but keeps his sword sheathed, right? So he who is lethal but also peaceful, the eye of the storm. That's what that says to me. The meek are the eye of the storm resonators, and they shall inherit the earth. You know, in the facile, twinkified Christianity of the modern world, where all the rainbow banners are going up, it's basically, you know, nothing in the Bible really means anything. It's just basically, it's a pseudo-satanic religion, you know, just out there to as a subtle parody of actual Christianity. But, you know, that's, I guess, for another video. But it's just that's it, you know, basically be lethal but keep your sword sheathed, right? Again, that's basically saying the concealed carry permit holders will inherit the earth, right? So yeah, be that one who slays obstacles and not humans, right? Be that one who destroys barriers to glory, and not one who destroys monuments and you know, cultural institutions, right? So that's my video today. Hope you guys have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.